And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Frank Vasner. This is September 5th, 2021. My opening statement, there's a surprising rumor leaking from inside the Tigers front office while football gets underway in the college and pro levels. Frank, what is your opening statement?
Well, my opening statement happens to relate to the two main college teams in this state. Both Michigan State and Michigan made a good first impression in week one with convincing victories, and only time will tell to see if they can hold up that performance as the weeks go on.
All right. So before we get started, we want to remind everyone that this show is sponsored by the Viget Sports mobile app, where great fans cover. Download it from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Sign up and type up the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the rest of the letters being lowercase, including the letter B in the middle, as in billionaire. Also, a shout out to Cali Tickets for sponsoring the Detroit Sports Rag, created by Jeff Moss. You can follow him on Twitter at HowAboutIt91. Visit CaliTickets.com to purchase tickets to one of their featured events. So, retweet there. All right. So, first off, some breaking news from yesterday. It was a rumor from Jeff Moss, his screen name Marlo Moss on Twitter at HowAboutIt91. He tweeted, hashtag Tigers rumor, AJ Hinch cannot stand Al Avila. Avila is going to get kicked upstairs and a new GM approved by Hinch will be brought in. The Tigers cannot afford to lose Hinch, who can opt out of his contract after next season, after 2022, that is. The Littlefield move was the first shoe to drop, unquote. So I got some truth and facts to back it up. There are at least several players on the Tigers roster that just aren't good enough to be on a contending team, such as Nico Goodrum, Grayson Griner, even Miguel Cabrera, who's already getting old, Matt Boyd, who keeps giving up a few runs per game and not lasting too many innings pitched per game. Also, Willie Castro, Derek Holland, Matt Manning, and even Tarek Skubal, who continues to rack up strikeouts per game, but at the same time give up too many runs per game as well, which isn't good enough. The upside stats mean nothing if a player's flaws keep hurting this team. Plus, their defense still really needs to improve statistically based on how many errors a few Tigers players have made all this season, such as Nico Goodrum, even Jonathan Scope, and Jamer Candelario, and Willie Castro, like I mentioned before. So, Frank, the facts are there. I pointed them out. When it's time for the Tigers to contend, changes need to be made, period.
Well, you're absolutely right about changes needing to be made, and the fact that AJ Hinch is not able to tolerate Al Avila, that really isn't that surprising to me, given the fact that Hinch was brought here to win games, but I think he realizes, hey, I can't win a lot with this group I have right now. We need to do more. And I think that's further backed up by Al Avila's recent comments about upcoming free agency, saying, oh, we can't put all our eggs in one basket, which might lead to a hint that they're probably not going to go all in for Carlos Correa or somebody of that nature, or they're just going to add some pieces here and there. But, of course, this is the same Al Avila that said, hey, rebuild's over, we're building now. That if you say something like that, that means, hey, we're going to spend money, we're going to be at the big boy table now. But then he goes and backpedals on what he says. That's something that shouldn't sit well with anybody, especially Hinch. And as for who could be brought in, that's another question in itself. Only time will tell. I'm sure AJ Hinch has some guys who he wouldn't mind working for, whether they be from Houston's front office or some other places, but at least somebody who's willing to go out and spend some money in free agency and make the team better, and also continue to do a good job of drafting players and acquiring assets to help further things along and speed up the progress made. So a lot remains to be seen. I'm not really surprised by this rumor that Moss came out with, but I think it's only a sign of things to come.
Yeah, only a sign of things to come is right. But the Tigers have to win that offseason. They have to earn that offseason and then prove it on the field when the next regular season comes and stuff like
You're
that.
absolutely right.
Yeah, and it'll have to start from the top as well, because there are many fans that already can't stand Al Avila. They pulled their hair out when Chris Ilitch, cheapskate Chris Ilitch, signed Al Avila to a multi-year contract extension, and I went ballistic in 2019 on our Periscope at Michigan_Truth.
I remember that one quite well.
Yep, true. So credit to Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag on the Tigers rumor. It wasn't an article written on his website, but visit his website anyway at DetroitSportsRag.com to see all of his provocative and comprehensive written articles about our Detroit pro sports teams, about all our Detroit pro sports teams. So that's Tigers. Now to the Michigan State Spartans, who beat the Northwestern Wildcats 38-21. Kenneth Walker III, 264 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. That is impressive. That was too much to prove for the Northwestern Wildcats, who just couldn't muster much offense. They tried to come back 3 times. Michigan State's secondary wasn't covering any receivers all game long, but its defensive line did its job. Frank, I want your thoughts on that one.
Well, the first thing I will say is I'd heard how much Mel Tucker wanted his running backs to score a touchdown, and Kenneth Walker eased those concerns on the very first play from scrimmage with a 75-yard run for a score, and he ended up adding 3 more, and as you mentioned, 264 yards total. I think Walker has become the go-to running back with some capable options behind him in the event that he needs to get a breather, like Jordan Simmons, who ended up scoring on a screen pass, and thought Harold Joyner didn't do too badly aside from the fumble. Hopefully he's okay after he got knocked out of the game. And we'll see what happens more in the coming weeks. As for Peyton Thorne throwing the ball, wasn't great, but wasn't terrible either. Didn't throw any picks, didn't turn the ball over. Defensively, I like the performance of the defensive line, as well as linebackers. Quavaris Crouch, who was a transfer from Tennessee, I think he really jumped out at me. Cal Holiday, another linebacker, he was actually the highest graded defensive player per Pro Football Focus. Secondary, I still think is going to need some work to be done. But you know what? It's the first game. You can only get better from your first game to your second game. So only time will tell what happens there, what guys Scotty Hazelton, the defensive coordinator, decides to play back there, and what they continue to do in practice. Obviously, coming up, Youngstown State isn't going to be too challenging, so they should win that game. Obviously, we'll probably have predictions later on that one. But it'll be an opportunity for guys to show, hey, we've had our mistakes. First game took our lumps, but we're going to learn from them and get better.
Yeah, and they take on the Youngstown State football team Saturday at noon on the Big
Penguins.
Ten Network. The Penguins, thank you very much.
The Fighting Penguins of Youngstown State. I actually had a high school teacher who graduated from there.
Yeah, you know this more than me, admittedly. So, Frank, what is your predicted score on the Youngstown State Penguins game Saturday at noon on Big Ten Network in East Lansing? The Spartans' first home game.
My biggest predicted score, I think Michigan State probably wins this one in the neighborhood of 48-10. I think that they're going to continue to run the ball. Kenneth Walker's going to have another big day, but in the second half, Mel Tucker's going to end up pulling his first stringers and just letting a lot of the backups get some reps in. Probably let Anthony Russo get some reps at quarterback, because you got to have your backup ready in the event that he needs to step into action. And probably the defensive backs, they're going to have an opportunity to get better as well. Youngstown State, I know that was a time when they were a power in the football championship subdivision. Those days are long gone. So I think Michigan State should easily take care of business. I'll go 48-10 with a Spartan victory.
All right, I'll go 48-10 as well. So, moving on to the Michigan Wolverines. They easily hammered Western Michigan, the Broncos, 47-14 at the Big House. Cade McNamara, 138 passing yards, like 126 of them in the first half. 126 of them in the first half, and 2 touchdown passes, one of them to Ronnie Bell for a 76-yard score. Ronnie Bell, a little later on, left the game with an apparent leg injury. That's the only time that I've heard about what kind of injury Ronnie Bell had. But you hate to lose Ronnie Bell. Not sure when he's going to come back or if he's going to come back this season. But Frank, any further knowledge about that? And but not very much to analyze. Western Michigan's just part of the American Conference, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Michigan just kept on rolling.
Well, I do have some sad news for any Michigan fans who may be tuning into this. I have heard reports that Ronnie Bell did tear his ACL and he is done for the season. That is really a big blow to Michigan's receiving corps because aside from Bell, they don't have a ton of experience. Cornelius Johnson, Mike Sansestrill, I think I'm saying that correctly. And they had a couple other guys whose names escape me that did play yesterday and didn't look too bad. I mean, that was against Western Michigan, who didn't look too great either. But as the season goes on, that's going to get a lot tougher. Somebody has to step up and be a go-to option for Cade McNamara in the passing game. I mean, the one thing I was impressed with Michigan doing is they did run the football pretty well. I thought Blake Corum had a very nice game running the ball. McNamara looked all right throwing it. I mean, but the thing that does kind of warrant some concern, Taylor, is the play calling. When they were up big, they were running some reverses to wide receivers. I don't think that's an ideal time to kind of show that on film, especially when you have to play the likes of Penn State, Wisconsin, and Ohio State and Michigan State. Now they know what to expect. That's something you wait till a game like that to spring it on them, and it's great that you executed both reverses pretty well, but you kind of don't want them to be expecting it every time. And as for J.J. McCarthy getting some reps, I mean, I know a lot of people say, okay, he looked good and he had that one amazing throw across his body. Yeah, it did look impressive. Hey, I'll admit that. But this is kind of where I go back to now that's on film. And let's say something happens where, God forbid, Cade McNamara goes down with an injury. And then McCarthy gets thrust in. And, I mean, yeah, he's proven that he can make plays. But once teams get that film on him and opposing defensive coordinators can kind of see what he can do, like, okay, we're going to try and find his weaknesses and we're going to expose him, especially if it's against one of the big boys of the Big Ten. But all in all, I thought Michigan did a nice job. They handled their business. Honestly, I thought Western was going to probably put up more of a fight, especially since Caleb Ellaby, their quarterback, was the third best in passing efficiency last year behind Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. That's last year, though. But apparently, Michigan just said, we're going to come out, take care of business, and make a statement. So hats off to them. With Washington coming up next week, that's going to be somewhat interesting now. I actually initially had that pegged as a loss, but given the fact that Washington lost to Montana, an FCS school, inexplicably, I think Michigan should be able to win that game.
Yeah, except in a close margin. And we're going to get to the Michigan-Washington game, which is next Saturday at 8 p.m. on ABC. It's going to be a night game under Saturday Night Lights at the Big House. And Frank, what is your predicted score for Michigan versus Washington?
You know, this is a game I think Michigan's kind of got to play some old school Michigan football. where they're going to run the ball, control the line of scrimmage, kind of keep it close to the vest. Don't let Cade McNamara have to throw it too many times. I mean, if he has to, great. But like I mentioned, all these receivers have to step up and be a go-to guy. This is an opportunity for them. So I think Michigan probably wins somewhat grinded out close game. I'll go 21-17.
All right. So, yeah, even without Ronnie Bell, their defense is going to have to step up.
Yeah, I thought their defense actually did look pretty solid yesterday.
They did against Western Michigan.
Yeah, so they're gonna have to prove it against Washington as well. And keep in mind, Washington, even though they did lose, their defense returns pretty much their entire secondary. So young receivers, welcome to the show.
Yeah, that's true. So there's another factor besides the Ronnie Bell season-ending torn ACL surgery injury. So that's not quite all Michigan football yet. We heard from Jim Costa on Twitter at Jim Costa _. He tweeted, Jim Brandstatter announced that this is the last season for him and Dan Dierdorf in the Michigan football broadcast booth. Now, granted, Jim Brandstatter and Dan Dierdorf have been getting old. It was time for them to hang up their mics, of course. Jim Brandstatter may have been a great color commentator in the past, but he did very horribly as play-by-play commentator. With the play-by-play commentator, the way he called the games for the Michigan Wolverines starting in 2014, after Frank Beckman was forced to retire or resign before hanging up his mic. We're not going to go too further into Frank Beckman. Just Jim Brandstatter and Dan Dierdorf, this is their last season. It was about time. That was it.
I have to agree with you. I mean, look, I know Brandstatter. I thought he was phenomenal as a color analyst, but you and I both know, because we've had experience in the radio business calling games, color commentator and play-by-play are two different animals. And Brandstatter, I could tell, just never could seem to adjust right to it. I'm not saying that he was purposely horrible every game. You could tell he just wasn't the right guy, right, for the job. Now, as for who could replace him, there have been some people floating the rumor out that, Matt Shepard should leave the Tigers gig because he's not that good there and take over Michigan football. But I don't think he's still doing Eastern Michigan football anymore. I know he used to do that, if my memory serves me correctly.
Well, Shepard used to call EMU games on the radio in Ypsilanti.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. He did their football games, and he also did Michigan basketball as well. So I think only time is going to tell as to who takes over for Brandstatter and Dierdorf.
Mm-hmm.
If I think of someone who could take over as color analyst, the name that probably jumps out at me the most is John Jansen, because he, obviously a former player, was part of the national championship team, knows the game, and I think he's probably done a little bit of color commentary on Big Ten Network in the past.
Yeah, that's a good name. So that is finally Michigan football. Now transitioning to pro football and the Detroit Lions. Before we get to their first game against the 49ers, just an injury update. Backup quarterback Tim Boyle with a thumb injury and defensive end Deshaun Hand injured again, out at least the first 3 games of the NFL season. So not much to discuss there. Deshaun Hand's been injury prone. I wonder if the Lions could just let him walk.
I don't think they can, because if you make a cut, you can't cut somebody because of an injury. It's because of poor performance. I believe that's in the NFL CBA.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So Deshaun Hand's apparently then stuck in Detroit with the Lions, at least for now. So there's that. Now the Lions against the 49ers, Sunday at 1 on Fox. That's next Sunday at 1 on Fox. Ed Smith had provided his Viget predicted score last Wednesday, actually. His was 27-17. My Viget predicted score was 30-20. Now we just want yours, Frank. What is your Viget predicted score on 49ers at Lions?
Well, my Viget predicted score, I'm going to go 49ers win 27-16. I think that the Lions aren't really going to be able to score much because they have no receivers. They're probably going to be running the ball a lot with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams and whoever else is in the stable. But I think the real intriguing question is, who do the 49ers start? If they start Jimmy Garoppolo or if they give Trey Lance a start. Lance was the guy they drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, and he's looked good in preseason, so I don't know if they'll give him the start right away. Only time will tell there, but either way, I'll go 27-16, 49ers win.
All right, 27-16, says Frank. So, Lions home against the 49ers at Ford Field in Week 1 of the NFL 2021 season, next Sunday at 1 on Fox. Switching to NHL hockey, the Red Wings have signed unrestricted free agent forward Carter Rowney to a 1-year deal. Before we grade him, Frank, any idea where he came from?
He was previously with the Anaheim Ducks. I do know that he was on a cup-winning team in Pittsburgh in 2017. He was primarily a depth forward, though. I'll get to more of that in my what's your grade, but that's where he came from.
All right, so let's grade him. Let's grade him right away. What's your grade on Rowney?
Well, as I mentioned, he's pretty much a depth forward. He's probably just a fourth liner at best. Not going to provide a ton of offense, but from everything I've read about him, he's really good on the penalty kill and a fairly dependable defensive forward. So I'd say if he slots it on the fourth line, I'll give this a C- move by Steve Yzerman, just because I think you got to have guys who are able to be strong on the penalty kill, and do their job defensively. Okay, so I'd say C- move, mostly because of lack of offense, because his team needs scoring. But, he's got a role to do, and I think he could possibly do it pretty well. Only time will tell. So C- for me.
I'm going to go C+ because, like you mentioned, he's good on the penalty kill, and he could keep pucks out of his team's own net. That's kind of how you play defense, even as a forward, as any type of forward. So I'm going to go C+ on this one. Now they re-signed RFA, restricted free agent defenseman Filip Hronek, to a 3-year contract worth $13.2 million total, a $4.4 million average annual value. Frank, what's your grade on the re-signing of Hronek?
I'm going to give this one kind of that B+ A- range, because Hronek was the best defenseman on the team, even though his stats may not have shown it given the fact who was playing around him. This is somebody that Steve had to keep around as a key building block to the future. Plus, he can also kind of help bring along Moritz Seider when he comes in. I think if Seider ends up being a top pairing guy, Hronek will probably slide in on the second pair. So I'm giving this I'll go A- in this one, especially since the term isn't bad and the annual average is pretty affordable as well. And I do have to give a quick shout out to Prashant Thayer of The Athletic for pretty much predicting this signing dead on the nose, term and money.
Iyer's really good. Really,
yes,
really
he
good.
is.
And there's no way I'm going to grade this any lower than an A-. I'm going to go A- on Hronek as well. Frank, like you pointed out, Filip Hronek has been the Red Wings' best defenseman, and they need him. Therefore, Then one last team to cover, the Pistons acquiring center DeAndre Jordan and 4 second-round draft picks in a trade with the Brooklyn Nets for Jahlil Okafor and Sekou Doumbouya. And then the Pistons buy DeAndre Jordan out, and Jordan plans to sign a 1-year, $2.6 million contract with the Los Angeles Lakers, the former 2020 NBA champions. Frank, what is your grade on the DeAndre Jordan trade and buyout?
I think this is a pretty good move by Troy Weaver. And the fact that he sent Doumbouya packing, this means that the entire roster has been completely turned over in 14 months on the job by Weaver. So he basically sends Doumbouya and Okafor out, has to take on DeAndre Jordan's bad contract, which wasn't horrible, by the way, just kind of bad. I think he had $20 million in 2 years remaining, and then acquired some second-round picks for down the line. So you get some draft capital. Randy, you do have to buy him out, which he really wasn't going to fit in here anyway because DeAndre Jordan's best suited being on a contending team. So you got some draft. You mentioned you got draft picks on there. You don't really hurt your luxury tax, and you basically clear some space for somebody like Luka Garza to get some playing time with Okafor out, and Doumbouya wasn't really fitting in. So I will give this a B plus. Not real crazy about
I would
having
grade
to.
that a B plus.
Yeah, I mean the buyout thing, I'm not overly enthralled with, but you know what? I can look past it given the fact that you got some picks out of it as well.
Yeah. All right. So that is those are all the teams that we've covered. Now, what we've learned in terms of what we've discussed tonight. What I've learned, if the Tigers do indeed fire Al Avila after this season, then they'll have a much better chance of not only contending for a playoff spot, but also contending for and even winning a World Series ring. Sounds like a bold take from me, but that's what I've learned. Frank, what did you learn in terms of what we discussed tonight?
Well, what I've learned is the change that has happened and is to come with both of our college football teams in the state. With Michigan State, you saw transfers like Kenneth Walker, Quavaris Crouch, and others make an impact in their win against Northwestern.
Especially Walker.
Yes, Walker with his incredible performance. Those are guys that are going to be helping this roster move forward or down the line. But with Michigan, changes there as well. And not just on the field with players coming in and playing better, but also in the broadcast booth with Jim Brandstatter and Dan Dierdorf moving on.
Yeah, and that's what we've learned. Before we go, this show is sponsored by the Viget Sports mobile app, where great fans cover. Download it from the Apple App Store or Google Play. Sign up and type in the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the rest of the letters being lowercase, including the letter B in the middle as in billionaire. Also, a shout out to Cali Tickets for sponsoring the Detroit Sports Rag, created by Jeff Moss. Follow him on Twitter at HowAboutIt91, his screen name Marla Moss, and visit his website DetroitSportsRag.com to read his provocative and comprehensive articles about all of our Detroit professional sports teams. Visit CaliTickets.com to purchase tickets to one of their featured events while you're at it. Frank, excellent job as always. Our next episode is next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern when Ed Smith comes back and we all recap 49ers at Lions. Until then, on behalf of Ed Smith, for Frank Vazner, I'm Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DT2Phillips with 2 L's, and follow Frank Vazner on Twitter and Instagram at Frank_Vazner, VAJCNER, and follow our show on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like it on Facebook as the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Thanks very much for listening, watching, downloading, and sharing, and remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Power to the people, hit them with a high, and we rest our case. Stay out of trouble.